Most people don't stay broke because they lack intelligence. They don't stay broke because they lack talent. They don't stay broke because they don't have dreams. They stay broke because they've been taught their whole lives to fear money more than they pursue it. People grow up hearing phrases like money doesn't grow on trees. Be grateful for what you have. Don't take risks. Stay safe. Don't dream too big. And before they even realize it, they become adults who treat money like a dangerous animal, something to tiptoe around, something to survive with, something that only lucky people can attract, and that fear, that conditioning, that mindset is the silent prison that keeps millions stuck where they are. But here's the truth that very few are willing to confront. Money does not run from people, people run from money. People run from learning about it, people run from managing it, people run from investing it, people run from the discomfort required to grow it, and in that running they lose the very thing they're chasing. Money recognizes courage, money respects leadership, money responds to clarity, money gravitates toward those who say, "I'm scared, but I'm doing it anyway." Most people wait for confidence before they take action. The brave take action, and that is what builds confidence. Most people wait for the perfect moment. The brave make the moment perfect. Most people wait until they feel ready. The brave step forward while they are shaking. That is why money finds the brave, because bravery creates motion. Motion creates opportunities. Opportunities create wealth. Look closely at the people who are financially thriving today. None of them started out fearless. None of them began with certainty. None of them were born knowing what to do. They simply made one powerful decision. They refused to let fear dictate their financial life. The brave sit with books while the world watches TV. The brave build skills while others make excuses. The brave ask for the raise, start the business, try the idea, send the message, post the content, knock on the door, even when they're terrified of being ignored, judged, or rejected. The brave don't avoid discomfort, they hunt it, because they know discomfort is the gym where wealth is trained. And you must understand this. Money is not emotional, but it responds to emotion. Money is a reflection of how boldly you move in the world. How you speak, how you think, how you dare. Money finds the brave because bravery creates value. Bravery leads to learning. Bravery leads to growth. Bravery leads to actions that most people never take, and that is why most people never experience financial abundance. If you're tired of being broke mentally, emotionally, or financially, you must rise above the predictable patterns that have held you back. Spend differently, think differently, ask differently, move differently, speak differently, decide differently. Every time you choose courage over fear, you're sending a message to the universe: I am ready for more. And the moment you send that signal, doors will open, people will appear, opportunities will align, and money like a magnet will start moving toward you. Not because you wished for it, not because you deserved it, but because you were brave enough to grow into the person who can receive it. Today is not about having everything figured out. Today is not about being fearless. Today is about choosing one brave step, one bold move, one courageous decision that says, I refuse to stay broke in mindset, in habits, or in life. Be brave enough to learn. Be brave enough to risk. Be brave enough to change, because in the end, money always finds the brave. Most people stay broke not because of a lack of talent, intelligence, or capability, but because their relationship with money was shaped long before they even understood what money really was. From childhood, people absorb beliefs from parents, teachers, relatives, cultural systems, and society. These early messages often sound harmless, even loving, yet they carry powerful psychological weight that shapes a person's entire financial destiny. Statements like "we can't afford that," "money is hard to earn," "only greedy people get rich," "be satisfied with what you have," "don't dream too big," or "play it safe," become internal background music that repeats for years until it becomes truth. And when those beliefs are left unchallenged, they create a mindset rooted in fear, scarcity, and survival, not growth, not abundance, not wealth. Most people inherit financial trauma without even realizing it. The panic of parents arguing about bills, the embarrassment of saying, "I don't have money," the stress of seeing adults suffering because of financial limitations. These emotional imprints quietly teach the child that money equals stress, money equals danger, money equals conflict, and the human mind naturally tries to avoid whatever causes pain. So even as adults, people unconsciously sabotage financial progress because somewhere deep inside, money still feels like a threat rather than a tool. They don't learn to invest because they fear losing what little they have. They don't pursue high-income skills because they fear failure. They don't ask for opportunities because they fear rejection. They don't explore new possibilities because they fear disappointment. Fear becomes their financial operating system, running silently in the background. And fear is the most expensive mindset anyone can have. Most people were raised with survival-oriented thinking, not growth-oriented thinking. Their families taught them how to get by, not how to elevate. They were instructed to play small so they wouldn't risk big losses. They were encouraged to choose stability over expansion, comfort over challenge, familiarity over greatness. This conditioning creates adults who are physically grown but mentally confined by the limitations of their past. They follow safe paths, predictable jobs, low-risk decisions, the same routines year after year, all while wondering why nothing changes. They cling to what they know, even if it holds them back, because fear of the unknown feels greater than the pain of remaining stuck. And so they repeat generational patterns, work hard but earn little, save a tiny bit but never invest, struggle endlessly but rarely break through. They call this being responsible, when in reality it is repeating fear, dominated habits inherited from those who never escaped the cycle themselves. People stay broke because no one teaches them that money is not earned by working harder, but by thinking differently, by acting differently, by challenging beliefs that no longer serve them. Another powerful reason people remain financially stuck is that they see money as something external, something outside themselves, something they must chase, catch, and hold on to. But when money is viewed as something scarce, something that could disappear at any moment, the mind goes into defensive mode. Defensive minds make defensive choices, choices rooted in caution, hesitation, and protection. And defensive choices rarely lead to growth. People save with fear instead of strategy. They spend emotionally instead of intentionally. They avoid you opportunities because their inner voice says, "What if it goes wrong?" They start projects but quit early because discomfort feels threatening. They want financial abundance but are trapped in financial anxiety, and anxiety repels progress. People cannot rise financially while emotionally anchored to fear. One of the deepest truths is that people stay broke because they never question the financial identity they were given. If someone grows up hearing they are poor, they internalize poverty as identity. If they grow up hearing they are middle class, they internalize limitation. If they grow up hearing money is not for people like us, they never attempt to rise into spaces where wealth exists. Identity drives action. A person who believes they are meant for small things will never pursue big things. A person who believes wealth is unethical will never attract it. A person who believes they are unworthy of abundance will unconsciously push it away. And this identity takes root so subtly that most people don't even realize they are carrying it. It shows up in small daily habits, avoiding new financial opportunities, staying quiet in important conversations, accepting underpayment, settling for mediocre results, and assuming others know more or deserve more. Then comes the biggest trap of all. People stay broke because they believe money is earned through effort alone, not through alignment, knowledge, value, or courage. So they work themselves into exhaustion, long hours, multiple jobs, endless tasks, yet feel no closer to financial freedom. They think effort equals income, but in reality, direction equals income, clarity equals income, value equals income. They pour their energy into the wrong places, doing what feels familiar instead of what produces results. And when that strategy fails, they blame themselves instead of the system they inherited. They think they are the problem, when really the problem is the programming they absorbed from an early age. Most people stay broke because they avoid difficult truths. They avoid looking at their spending. They avoid facing their habits. They avoid studying money because it exposes the mistakes they've made. They avoid changing because change requires discomfort. They avoid accountability because accountability requires honesty. And so they drift from month to month, year to year, hoping something will magically improve without them having to evolve. But nothing changes until they confront the thoughts, habits, and emotions that keep them stuck. The real tragedy is that people know deep down they are capable of more, but fear convinces them they are not. Fear tells them they might fail. Fear tells them they're not smart enough. Fear tells them they're too late, too old, too behind, too unprepared. Fear whispers stories that feel like truth until they become self-full, filling prophecies. And people believe these stories because no one ever taught them how to rewrite them. No one ever told them that money is not an enemy to survive, but a partner to understand. No one ever showed them that abundance is not reserved for a select few, but available to anyone willing to break the patterns that kept past generations small. Most people stay broke because they live in the shadow of old fears instead of stepping into the light of new possibilities. Most people admire the brave, but very few understand what true bravery actually looks like in the real world. It's not loud. It's not glamorous. It's not a cinematic moment where music rises in the background. Real bravery is quiet, gritty, uncomfortable, and often lonely. It looks like sitting alone with a book when your friends are out wasting time. It looks like studying a skill you barely understand because you know one day it will change everything. It looks like showing up to a room full of people who seem smarter, richer, or more experienced than you, and resisting the urge to shrink. The brave are not born fearless. They simply choose to move through fear instead of obeying it. And this choice is what separates those who rise from those who remain stuck. When people talk about success, they often point to luck or opportunity, as if these things fall randomly from the sky. But if you look closely at the people whose lives changed, you'll always find a moment, sometimes a very small moment, where they decided to step into discomfort and do something their old self would have run from. Bravery is the willingness to try when failure feels possible. It's the willingness to ask questions even when you're embarrassed not to know. It's the willingness to take a small risk today so you can take a bigger one tomorrow. The brave don't wait until they feel ready because they understand that ready is a myth the mind creates to delay growth. They don't wait for perfect timing because perfect timing never arrives. They don't wait for someone to give them permission because they finally realize no one is coming to save them. So they study, they ask, they observe. They step forward even when their hands are shaking. And every time they do, something powerful happens. Their world expands, their confidence grows, their perspective shifts. The opportunities that once felt distant begin to move toward them, not because they are lucky, but because bravery acts like a magnet for breakthroughs. Most people underestimate how essential discomfort is to financial growth. They think money comes from talent or intelligence alone, but money comes from maturity, and maturity is born in uncomfortable situations. It comes from training your mind to stay calm when others panic. It comes from walking into unfamiliar territory where your ego cannot hide behind what you already know. The brave voluntarily place themselves in these situations. They ask for mentorship and sometimes get ignored. They pitch ideas and sometimes get rejected. They apply for roles they feel underqualified for and sometimes hear no. But they keep moving. They treat rejection as redirection. They treat failure as data. They treat discomfort as training. And because they are willing to feel what others avoid, they grow while others remain the same. The truth is, money responds to courage because courage is the foundation of every skill that leads to wealth. Want to learn sales? You must be brave enough to handle hearing no. Want to build a business? You must be brave enough to take risks without guarantees. Want to invest? You must be brave enough to commit money today in exchange for a future reward you cannot physically see. Want to lead a team? You must be brave enough to make decisions that will affect others. Without courage, every opportunity feels like a threat. Every new idea feels like danger. Every challenge feels like a reason to quit. The untrained mind sees discomfort and retreats. The brave see discomfort and walk toward it, because they understand that behind discomfort lies a version of themselves capable of earning, thinking, and living on a higher level. When people choose comfort, they choose stagnation, and stagnation is the highway to staying broke, not just financially, but mentally and emotionally. People who stay in their comfort zones avoid growth because growth requires being seen, being stretched, being challenged. They continue doing what is familiar, even when it no longer serves them. They stay in jobs they hate because learning something new feels intimidating. They avoid opportunities because they fear embarrassment or judgment. They stay around the same minds, the same energy, the same routines. Their days repeat like a loop. Nothing changes because they never step into the spaces where change lives. On the other hand, the brave break the loop. They walk into environments that force them to evolve. They surround themselves with people who think bigger, move faster, and expect more. And those environments demand a higher version of them. Through this pressure, they rise. The brave often experience moments where they doubt themselves, but they keep going anyway because they understand that doubt is a sign of growth, not a signal to stop. They don't pretend to be perfect. They don't fake confidence. They simply show up repeatedly, and repetition becomes competence. Competence becomes confidence. Confidence becomes momentum, and momentum becomes transformation. People on the outside look at them and think they're naturally gifted or they're lucky. But what they never see are the countless moments of bravery, small, silent, personal moments, where the brave faced their fears and took the next step anyway. It's easy to admire successful people from a distance, but if you were to observe their journey up close, you'd find that success is built on thousands of private decisions to act courageously. These decisions happen when no one is watching. When the brave say yes to learning something uncomfortable, when they say no to distractions that weaken their discipline, when they resist quitting even though quitting would be easier, each decision feels small, but together they form the backbone of a wealthy mindset. Courage compounds, Every brave choice strengthens the next one. Every time they push through fear, fear loses its power. Eventually, the brave begin to expect more from themselves. They begin to speak differently, move differently, think differently. They start walking into opportunities instead of walking past them, and that shift is what changes their financial trajectory. Money gravitates toward people who grow, because growth creates value, and growth requires bravery. A person who is too afraid to be uncomfortable will never master the skills that produce wealth. They will never build the network that opens doors. They will never enter the rooms where income levels rise. Meanwhile, the brave put themselves in positions where opportunity can find them. They train their mind to handle pressure. They expand their capacity to learn. They lean into challenges instead of running from them. They build emotional resilience, financial intelligence, and personal strength, all qualities that money is naturally drawn to. And so, while others remain trapped by fear, the brave rise through it. They understand that courage is not the absence of fear. It is choosing action in the presence of it. And that single choice to act despite fear is what sets them on a path few ever dare to walk. Most people spend their whole lives wishing for more money, dreaming of more money, praying for more money. Yet they never stop to understand the simple truth that money does not respond to wishes. It responds to direction. It responds to clarity. It responds to discipline. People think money is an emotional concept, something tied to luck, blessings, or fate. But money is a system. Money is a reflection. Money follows those who treat it with intention, not those who treat it as hope. Most people scatter their energy across dozens of tasks, ideas, distractions, habits, and desires, but the brave choose a path and commit to it. They don't waste their days wishing that life would change. They create the change by giving their energy a target, a purpose, a direction. And because of that, money can finally recognize where it is supposed to go. Money cannot find someone who does not know what they want. Money cannot stay with someone who hasn't decided who they're becoming. Money doesn't stick to confusion, hesitation, or inconsistency. It attaches itself to those who are focused, committed, and self-directed. When a person lacks clarity, life becomes a cycle of stress and reaction. They work, survive, pay bills, repeat. They feel lost, overwhelmed, and stuck. They complain that their financial life never improves, yet they never sit down to define exactly what improvement means. What amount, what goal, what deadline, what plan, what action? They avoid these questions because clarity is uncomfortable. It forces them to confront their responsibilities. It forces them to admit their mistakes. It forces them to see where their habits betray their desires. But the brave embrace clarity because they know clarity is the birthplace of control. Once you know what you want, every decision becomes easier. Once you know what your financial target is, you stop wasting money, time, and energy. You stop chasing distractions. You stop scattering yourself across things that don't matter. You start moving like a person who respects their future more than they fear the work required to get there. Money reacts to discipline even more than it reacts to intelligence. Discipline is the hidden foundation beneath every success story. Waking up early not because you love mornings, but because you love improvement. Practicing skills when you're tired because your goals matter. Saying no to temptations because your future deserves better. Studying when others are relaxing because you understand that knowledge compounds. Choosing long-term rewards over short-term pleasure because you're done repeating old cycles. Discipline is what transforms ordinary effort into extraordinary results. Most people think discipline is punishment, but the brave understand that discipline is freedom. Discipline is the ability to control your life instead of letting life control you. And money flows naturally toward people who live with intention because they make choices that preserve, multiply, and respect their resources. There is a reason why some people work less yet earn more. Clarity directs their actions, while discipline fuels their consistency. They don't jump from idea to idea hoping something magically works. They don't waste energy chasing small distractions. They don't let every emotional impulse dictate their choices. They focus deeply on one path, master the skills required, and keep showing up even on the days when motivation fades. Most people give up too quickly because they mistake slow progress for failure. They think if results are not immediate, the effort isn't worth it. But the brave understand that consistent effort, applied in a single direction, always compounds. A focused mind grows faster. A trained skill becomes valuable. A disciplined habit becomes automatic. And when these elements combine, money follows. Money is attracted to confidence, and confidence only comes through competence, and competence is built through focused repetition. When someone tries something for a few days and then quits because it feels difficult, they never reach the level of mastery required to earn more. They never repeat the action long enough to become good at it. They never build the confidence that comes from fully knowing what they're doing. But the brave push through the beginner stage, the awkward stage, the confusing stage, the slow stage. They understand that all mastery begins with discomfort. They don't avoid the process, they commit to it. And as they grow more capable, they also become more valuable. Money follows value, and value grows through clarity and discipline. Most people scatter their energy because they're afraid of choosing one direction. They fear making the wrong choice. They fear missing out on other possibilities. They fear commitment. And this fear keeps them stuck in an endless loop of starting, stopping, doubting, hesitating, and restarting. Meanwhile, years of their life pass by as they remain in the same place. The brave understand that choosing a direction is more important than choosing a perfect direction. Movement creates insight. Insight creates improvement. Improvement creates opportunities, and opportunities attract money. Even when the brave choose a path that isn't perfect, their movement creates momentum, and momentum reveals better roads along the way. Meanwhile, the people who wait for the perfect road never take a single step. Clarity also requires honesty, something many people avoid. It requires admitting why their financial life isn't improving, acknowledging the habits that drain their money, recognizing the laziness or fear that holds them back, and facing the reality they've tried to ignore. But the brave welcome honesty because honesty is the beginning of transformation. When you clearly see what needs to change, you can finally take action. When you stop lying to yourself, you stop living on autopilot. When you admit your weaknesses, you can finally strengthen them. Money doesn't respond to the stories people tell themselves. It responds to the actions people take. When a person becomes clear and disciplined, their energy becomes magnetic. Others begin to respect them. Opportunities begin to notice them. People begin to trust them. Their actions become aligned with their future instead of their fears. They walk with purpose, speak with intention, move with direction. Their progress might be slow at first, but it is steady, powerful, and unstoppable. And over time, clarity and discipline turn ordinary efforts into extraordinary results. Money flows to the people who know where they are going, show up consistently, and take responsibility for their growth. Because money doesn't respond to hope. It responds to purpose. Most people stay broke because they fear taking action more than they fear staying the same. And they don't realize that hesitation is one of the most expensive habits a human being can have. Every time a person hesitates, an opportunity silently closes. Every time they overthink, momentum dies. Every time they wait for the right moment, they lose the very momentum that could have changed their life. People often believe the biggest risk in life is making the wrong move, but the truth is that the biggest risk is making no move at all. The world does not reward people who sit on the sidelines observing, analyzing, preparing, and waiting. It rewards those who take imperfect steps forward. Action builds progress, but inaction builds regret. And regret is far more painful than failure, because failure at least teaches you something, but regret teaches you nothing except the reality that you could have done more, tried more, become more. The reason action feels scary for most people is because they are conditioned to avoid discomfort. From childhood, people are trained to stay within the boundaries of what feels safe. They're taught to answer questions correctly, follow instructions, seek approval, and avoid mistakes. But wealth growth and transformation require the opposite. They require testing, exploring, experimenting, and often failing. People are afraid to take action because they fear judgment. What will others say if they fail? They fear embarrassment. What if they look foolish? They fear uncertainty. What if they make a mistake? And underneath all of these fears lies the deepest one, the fear of discovering they are capable of more than the identity they have been holding onto. Because stepping into a new level of life means letting go of the old version of yourself, and letting go is uncomfortable. The brave understand something that most people don't. Action is clarity. Action is confidence. Action is transformation. You don't act because you're confident. You become confident because you act. You don't act because you're sure. You become sure because you acted enough to learn what works. People who wait for confidence before taking action wait forever. People who wait for certainty never move. The brave act first and adapt along the way, and that adaptability is precisely what makes them successful. They treat action like a teacher. Every step, even if imperfect, brings new information, new perspective, new strength. They know they will not have all the answers when they begin, but they also know that answers reveal themselves to those who move. Most people don't realize that even the smallest actions can completely alter their financial destiny. Reading one book can awaken a new idea. Learning one skill can shift their income. Sending one message can lead to a new opportunity. Meeting one person can transform the direction of their life. Recording one video, applying for one job, making one investment, creating one piece of content, any small decision done consistently can open doors people never imagined. But because these actions feel tiny, people underestimate them. They think big results must require big steps, so they never start. They overlook the truth that every major success story began with a small, simple action taken by someone who was unsure, unprepared, and afraid, but who acted anyway. The brave also understand that waiting is dangerous. Life moves quickly. Opportunities appear and disappear. Markets change, industries shift, trends evolve, people grow, and technology advances. Those who hesitate get left behind not because they are less intelligent, but because they are slower to act. The world rewards speed, consistency, and willingness. The people who rise are those who respond quickly to opportunities instead of overthinking them. They take action not because they know everything, but because they trust themselves to figure things out. They trust their resilience more than their fear. They trust their potential more than their insecurity. And because of that, action becomes their default state, while hesitation becomes the habit they refuse to entertain. When people avoid taking action, they often tell themselves they are planning, but planning without execution is just disguised procrastination. Many people love planning because planning feels safe. It gives the illusion of progress without the discomfort of risk. They create lists, strategies, notes, ideas, outlines, and visions. Yet their life never changes because the bridge between planning and reality is action, and they never cross that bridge. The brave plan, but they don't get stuck in planning. They refine the plan while moving. They make adjustments along the way. Their mindset is simple. If I move, something will happen. If I don't, nothing will happen. Action is also the doorway to discipline. People often struggle with discipline, not because they are incapable, but because they never take the first step that allows discipline to grow. Discipline is not something you wait to feel. It is something you build through repeated action. Once you act once, acting again becomes easier. Consistency is born from repetition, not motivation. Motivation is temporary, action creates habit, and habit creates identity. A person who takes action develops the identity of someone who follows through. And once you see yourself as a person who takes action, your entire life begins to shift. People who remain stuck often believe they need a perfect plan before starting, but the brave know that perfection is a trap that keeps people from beginning. Nothing great ever starts perfect. Businesses don't start perfect. Skills don't start perfect. Videos don't start perfect. Conversations, strategies, investments, none of them start perfect. But perfectionism convinces people that they need more time, more information, more certainty, more validation. And while they wait, their dreams lose energy, their willpower fades, their belief weakens. The brave avoid the perfection trap by choosing progress over perfection, movement over hesitation, and learning over waiting. And perhaps the most transformational truth is this: action creates identity, and identity shapes destiny. When a person acts boldly, even in small ways, they begin to see themselves differently. They begin to believe they are capable, courageous, and worthy. This new identity creates new actions, new habits, and new decisions. And these decisions lead to new levels of income, opportunity, and abundance. Most people never reach their financial potential simply because they never take the actions that unlock it. The brave do. And that single difference changes everything. Whenever people talk about courage, they often imagine dramatic battles or heroic rescues. But the truth is that the real battleground is much quieter. It's the moment you sit with yourself and face the question, am I really living the life I want, or am I simply surviving because it's safe? Many people stay broke not because they lack talent, intelligence, or opportunity, but because they keep choosing the comfort of certainty over the discomfort of growth. They choose routines that feel familiar over risks that feel frightening. But money, success, and transformation do not arrive where fear is in control. They flow to the people who train their minds to take brave steps even when the fear is loud. A person's financial destiny changes the moment they stop running from risk and start learning how to master it. Every day, countless dreams die quietly in the minds of people who convince themselves that now is not the right time. They say it when they want to start a business, when they want to change their career, when they want to invest, when they want to learn a new skill, or when they want to put themselves in a room with people who push them to grow. They postpone action out of fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of losing the little they have. And yet, life continues to show one truth: fear never goes away, but your ability to act in spite of it can grow stronger than the fear itself. The reason money finds the brave is because bravery creates movement, movement creates momentum, momentum creates opportunities, and opportunities create wealth. Look at the people who changed their lives dramatically. Not one of them waited for perfect conditions. They took their first step when everything in their life was uncertain. They invested when others hesitated. They tried again after failing. They believed in themselves when no one else did. They saw their fear as a signal, not a stop sign. And because they acted while others delayed, they opened doors that would have remained closed if they had stayed in their comfort zone. Money flows to brave people because bravery allows you to be at the right place at the right time, not by luck, but by movement. On the opposite side, the reason many people remain broke is because they never give themselves permission to fail. They treat failure as something terrible instead of something temporary. They want success, but only if it comes with zero discomfort, zero criticism, zero mistakes, and that mindset becomes a trap, because without the willingness to fall, you can never learn to rise. Without the willingness to look foolish for a moment, you can never look powerful later. Every successful person you admire has a long list of failures behind them, yet the world only remembers their victories. That is why courage is necessary. Courage allows you to start before you are ready. Courage allows you to move even when you feel small. Courage allows you to grow into the person who can handle the money, the success, the responsibility, and the opportunities waiting for you. There are people who pray for financial freedom but ignore every opportunity that requires bravery. They want the reward without the risk. They want wealth without discomfort. They want change without action. But life does not work that way. Money responds to value. Value grows when you stretch yourself, and stretching yourself requires courage. You cannot expand your income if you never expand your identity. You cannot expand your opportunities if you never expand your willingness to step into the unknown. The brave take the step, and from that step, doors open. The fearful stay still, and from that stillness, nothing changes. Imagine two people starting at the same point. One sees an opportunity and steps forward. The other sees the same opportunity and steps back. The one who steps forward learns something new, builds a connection, gains experience, and accelerates on the path to wealth. The one who steps back stays in the same routine, the same income, the same mindset, and eventually convinces themselves that life is unfair. But life isn't unfair. It simply rewards those who move and leaves behind those who hesitate. Money finds the brave because bravery puts you into the environments where money circulates. Bravery is not about recklessness. It's not about jumping blindly. It's about walking forward even when your voice trembles. It's about making decisions with intention. It's about trusting that you can handle challenges you've never faced before. It's about looking at the mountain and saying, even if I climb slowly, I will climb. The brave are not fearless. They are simply more committed to their goals than to their fears. And because of this commitment, the universe, opportunities, and money begin to align with them. Bravery sends a message, I am ready, and life responds. There will be moments when bravery feels expensive, when you must sacrifice temporary comfort for long-term gain, when you must invest time, energy, money, or pride, when you must face criticism from the people who don't understand your journey, when you must act without a guarantee of success. But those moments are the gateway to a different life. Every breakthrough comes after a brave decision. Every chapter of growth begins with one moment of courage. And people who consistently choose courage over fear eventually build a life that fearful people call lucky. If you want money to find you, start by becoming someone who moves with purpose. Someone who is not controlled by fear. Someone who understands that discomfort is the price of growth. Someone who knows that failure is not the opposite of success, but part of it. Someone who knows that waiting for perfect conditions is the fastest way to stay broke. Someone who believes that they can handle more than they think. Someone who takes responsibility for their future, one brave decision at a time. Bravery transforms your relationship with money because it transforms your relationship with yourself. When you expand your courage, you expand your capacity. When you expand your capacity, you expand your value. And when you expand your value, money, opportunities, and abundance begin to move toward you naturally. The world has always rewarded those who dare to step beyond their fears. The question is never whether you are capable. The question is whether you are willing. The moment you choose bravery, everything begins to shift. Most people don't realize that the way they speak to themselves financially becomes the blueprint of their entire money journey. They don't understand that the stories they repeat silently, day after day, shape their beliefs, their habits, their opportunities, and ultimately their outcomes. When someone constantly says, "I can't afford this," "I'm just not good with money," or "people like me never get rich," that mindset becomes a cage. They lock themselves in patterns that keep them broke, not because the world is unfair, but because their internal narrative is built on limitation. Money cannot flow into a mind that constantly pushes it away with fear, doubt, and negative identity. The way you speak about money creates your relationship with money, and most people are completely unaware of how deeply their words are influencing their financial destiny. The truth is that words are seeds. Whatever you plant through repetition grows into habits. If you keep telling yourself you're struggling, you'll behave like someone who is meant to struggle. If you tell yourself opportunities are rare, you won't recognize them even when they stand in front of you. If you believe wealth is only for certain people, you'll never allow yourself to step into the environments where wealth is created. Most people stay broke because they internalize a story that was never theirs to begin with. Stories inherited from parents who struggled, from society that glorifies scarcity, from teachers who believed safety was better than ambition, from friends who normalize financial fear. And without realizing it, they adopt these beliefs as truth, never questioning whether they are even accurate. There is a powerful shift that happens when someone begins speaking differently to themselves. The moment you stop repeating sentences that shrink you and instead speak words that stretch you, everything begins to change. When you tell yourself, "I am capable of making more money," your brain starts searching for ways to make that sentence real. When you say, "I deserve financial freedom," you begin behaving like someone who protects their time, invests in their skills, and chooses better environments. When you declare, "I can learn anything I need to succeed," you stop being intimidated by the skills you don't have yet. The words you speak become a command to your subconscious mind, and the subconscious mind will always fight to make your dominant beliefs your reality. But this is where the challenge lies. Many people are so attached to their negative money identity that they don't know who they would be without it. Some people use their struggles as a shield to avoid responsibility. Some use the story "I'm broke" to avoid taking risks. Some use it to justify staying in the same job, the same routine, the same mindset. They say, "I have no choice." But the truth is they are choosing comfort over change. And as long as they speak these limiting words, their life will continue to reflect the limits they have accepted, not because they lack potential, but because they lack a story that empowers that potential. Think about the difference between someone who tells themselves making money is hard versus someone who says making money requires skill, but skills can be learned. The first person shuts the door before even trying. The second person opens possibilities. One mindset leads to paralysis, the other leads to action. One leads to fear, the other leads to learning. And the person who learns eventually surpasses the person who fears. Money does not find the most talented people. It finds the people whose internal language supports growth, persistence, creativity, and courage. People who rise financially are not magically confident from the beginning. They train their confidence, they train their inner dialogue, They talk to themselves in ways that lift them up rather than pin them down. They remind themselves of their potential instead of their limitations. They say things like, "I can figure this out," even when they've never done it before. They say, "I'm capable of earning more," even when their current situation seems impossible. They say, "This fear is temporary, but my growth will be permanent," even when the fear feels overwhelming. Little by little, their internal language builds a foundation of belief strong enough to support big decisions. The world responds differently to someone who believes they deserve more. Opportunities seem to appear more often, but in reality, they were always there. The person just wasn't mentally available to see them. When you speak courage into your life, you start noticing the people, information, and ideas that align with that courage. When you speak abundance, you start recognizing paths that lead to abundance. When you speak possibility, you naturally look for solutions instead of excuses. You literally train your mind to scan for success instead of scanning for danger. This is how powerful inner language is. It changes what your brain pays attention to. There are people who sabotage themselves financially without realizing it. They say, "I'm not ready," and they miss the perfect moment. They say, "I'm scared," and let fear decide their path. They say, "What if I fail?" and never allow themselves to find out what would happen if they succeeded. These sentences keep them broke far more than any external situation. And that's why shifting your internal dialogue is the first step toward building wealth. Because wealth requires decisions. Decisions require belief, and belief is formed by the words you repeat most often. Imagine waking up every morning and feeding your mind a different script. Imagine telling yourself, "I am becoming financially stronger every day." Imagine saying, "I can make decisions that change my life." Imagine reminding yourself, "I am worthy of abundance." These sentences are not magic spells, they are mental workouts. Just like you train muscles through repetition, you train confidence, courage, and vision through repeated language. Over time, this new narrative becomes automatic, and once it becomes automatic, your behavior begins to align with it naturally. When people change the way they speak about money, they change the way they feel about money. When they change the way they feel, they change the way they act. When they change the way they act, they change the results they attract. This is why some people rise so quickly. They don't wait for external circumstances to give them permission. They give themselves permission through their own words. Money finds them because they mentally positioned themselves to receive it long before it physically arrived. The shift begins the moment someone chooses to stop repeating the story of limitation and starts telling the story of possibility. Because the story you tell yourself becomes the life you live, one of the greatest reasons people stay broke is because they underestimate the power of consistency. They imagine wealth as a sudden event, a dramatic breakthrough, a moment when life magically shifts from scarcity to abundance. They dream of the day everything changes instantly, but they ignore the quiet truth that transformation often hides inside the small habits they repeat every single day. People are not kept in poverty because they lack ambition. They are held back because they lack the discipline to keep showing up when results are slow, when progress is invisible, when nothing dramatic is happening. Money finds the brave because bravery includes the willingness to keep pushing forward even when the journey feels endless. The brave stay committed long after the excitement fades, and that is where fortune begins to respond. There are thousands of people with big dreams, bold visions, and fire in their hearts, but only a handful commit to the daily actions required to turn those dreams into reality. Why? Because consistency is not glamorous. Consistency asks you to do the work when nobody is watching. Consistency asks you to keep going when you're tired. Consistency asks you to choose discipline over distraction. Consistency forces you to confront your excuses, to let go of the need for immediate reward, and to trust a version of yourself that you have not yet met. And that trust is difficult for many people. They don't believe in the power of slow progress, so they quit early. They don't trust the process, so they sabotage their own efforts. They chase motivation, but they ignore discipline. And because they never stay long enough in the discomfort, they never reach the breakthrough that was waiting on the other side. Most people don't stay broke because they are incapable. They stay broke because they are inconsistent. They start something with passion but abandon it at the first sign of struggle. They invest time in learning but fail to apply it consistently. They take one step forward and then stop for months. They want a better life, but their habits do not support that desire. And nothing in the world changes until your daily actions begin to reflect your highest goals, not your temporary emotions. Emotions are unstable. Passion is seasonal. Motivation rises and falls like the weather. But discipline is steady, and those who build discipline build wealth. Think of the people who transformed their finances. None of them relied solely on big, dramatic decisions. They built their success through 1,000 small choices that, on their own, looked insignificant. Reading one chapter a day, saving a small percentage of their income, learning a new skill in 20-minute sessions, networking with one person a week, uploading one piece of content consistently, improving a tiny bit every day. Those small actions compound over time, quietly building momentum, quietly opening doors, quietly shaping a new identity, and one day that consistency erupts into opportunity. Suddenly other people say, "You're lucky," without understanding the years of effort that created that luck. Money finds the brave because bravery is not just about taking big risks. It is about staying committed to small actions when the world offers you 1,000 reasons to stop. It's about showing up when no one is clapping, when no one believes in you yet, when you are still invisible. The brave understand something most people don't. Consistency is courage. Every day you choose to work on something meaningful, even when it's hard, even when results are delayed, even when doubt whispers in your ear. That is courage in its purest form. Many people crave results but don't crave the process. They want the final chapter without reading the book. They admire successful people but ignore the consistency that built that success. They want financial freedom, but they binge entertainment instead of education. They want opportunities but spend hours scrolling instead of building. They want to master a skill but quit after the first setback, and then they wonder why nothing changes. Life doesn't reward occasional effort, it rewards consistent effort. The world does not open its arms to those who try once. It opens its arms to those who return again and again, even after failing, even after doubting, even after wanting to quit. There is a moment that separates those who grow from those who remain stuck. It is the moment when a person chooses discipline over excuses, when they decide that excuses may feel comfortable, but they do not build the life they want, when they decide that consistency is more important than mood, when they realize that every day they don't show up, someone else is showing up, learning, improving, and becoming the person they dream of being. The brave understand this. That is why they rise. Imagine what would happen if a person committed to improving just 1% every day. It sounds small, almost insignificant, but over a year, that tiny daily improvement compounds into a transformation so large that it feels like a different lifetime. The problem is that most people never give themselves enough time to experience this compounding effect. They quit at 1% long before reaching 100%. They break the chain, restart, break it again, and repeat the cycle. They treat discipline like a temporary project instead of a lifelong commitment. And so their life remains temporary in its progress, temporary in its momentum, temporary in its results. Consistency also builds confidence. Every time you follow through on a promise you made to yourself, you prove to your mind that you are reliable. And every time you break a promise to yourself, you weaken your trust in your own potential. Many people don't feel confident not because they lack ability, but because they don't trust themselves to stay consistent. When you can trust yourself to show up even on the tough days, something powerful happens. You become unstoppable. You no longer depend on motivation. You no longer wait for permission. You no longer fear slow progress. Because you know that slow progress is still progress, and progress eventually brings reward. Money gravitates toward people who are dependable, focused, and persistent. Employers trust them. Clients trust them. Opportunities trust them. The universe itself seems to trust them. Consistency creates a reputation even before the world knows your name. When you keep showing up, the world eventually has no choice but to notice. So many people look for shortcuts, but the truth is that consistency is the shortcut. It is the fastest way to separate yourself from the millions of people who quit too soon. It is the fastest way to build skill, reputation, credibility, and opportunity. And it is the fastest way to attract money, because money loves reliability. Money loves discipline. Money loves people who don't just start, but continue. The brave are not always the loudest. Sometimes the bravest people are the ones doing the quiet, unglamorous work every single day. They are the ones planting seeds long before harvest season arrives. They are the ones building a foundation before the world sees the structure. They are the ones who choose consistency even when no one applauds them. And one day, they become the people others look at and say, "How did they become so successful?" The answer is simple: consistency. They didn't give up. They didn't quit. They showed up even when they didn't feel like it. They moved forward even when they moved slowly. They did the small things that most people ignore. And because they stayed long enough in the discomfort, they earned the life that the inconsistent only dream about. One of the biggest reasons people stay broke is because they surround themselves with the wrong environment. People who drain their energy, conversations that shrink their vision, and routines that keep them trapped in small thinking. Environment is the silent architect of destiny. You can have ambition, talent, dreams, and intelligence, but if you place all of that inside an environment that discourages growth, mocks ambition, magnifies fear, and normalizes mediocrity, those dreams slowly suffocate. People forget that you don't rise to the level of your potential. You rise to the level of the environment you put yourself in. And most people unknowingly stay broke because they stay surrounded by people who are also broke in vision, broke in discipline, broke in mindset, and comfortable with staying exactly where they are. There are friends who love you but do not align with your future. There are relatives who care for you but speak fear into everything you attempt. There are coworkers who enjoy your presence but remind you every day that comfort is safer than growth. They tell you not to take risks, not to dream too big, not to try anything different. They project their limitations onto you, not because they're malicious, but because your ambition exposes their own lack of movement. When you aim high, it makes others uncomfortable. When you talk about goals, it reminds them of their unattempted dreams. And instead of rising with you, some try to pull you back to the familiar. That is why environment is powerful. Your surroundings either feed your future or feed your fears. People underestimate how contagious mindset is. Spend too much time around people who complain about money, and you start complaining too. Spend too much time with those who believe wealth is impossible, and you start believing it too. Spend too much time around those who live for weekends and dread Mondays, and you begin to think that settling for an average life is normal. But none of it is normal. It's just familiar. And familiarity is dangerous when your goals require transformation. To build a new life, you must be surrounded by people who live, think and dream at a higher frequency than the one you're trying to escape. Money finds the brave, and one of the bravest actions a person can take is changing their environment, stepping away from people who limit them, stepping closer to people who challenge them, and stepping into rooms that make them feel like a beginner. Growth requires humility, it requires courage, it requires the willingness to say, I don't know enough yet, but I'm willing to learn. Many people stay broke because they are afraid to feel out of place, afraid to look inexperienced, afraid to admit they want more. But the truth is that if you're always the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. You cannot expand in a space that does not stretch you. You cannot grow when everyone around you is comfortable being small. There are people whose entire life changed because they met one mentor who believed in them, one friend who challenged them, one environment that elevated their standards, one community where ambition was celebrated instead of criticized. You don't need 100 people. You sometimes only need one voice that speaks life into your dreams, one person who shows you what's possible, one example that breaks your limiting beliefs. But you will never meet that one person if you stay surrounded by people who pull you backward. Your environment shapes your habits, and your habits shape your income. Look at your circle. Do they talk about opportunities or gossip? Do they set goals or make excuses? Do they encourage growth or normalize laziness? Do they invest in themselves or complain about the price of self-improvement? Your circle is either an elevator or a cage. It will either lift you higher or trap you where you are. And most people don't rise financially because their environment keeps them mentally, emotionally, and spiritually stuck. Many people reject opportunities because no one in their circle understands them. They delay decisions because someone close to them plants fear in their mind. They feel guilty for wanting a better life because others call it pride or greed. And in trying to protect their relationships, they sacrifice their potential. But protecting the wrong relationships can cost you the right future. Not everyone is meant to walk with you into every season of your life. Some people are part of your history, not your destiny. Some people are part of your comfort, not your calling. And when you cling to them out of guilt or fear, you unintentionally limit the life you were meant to build. People often say, I'll grow first, then I'll change my environment. But it doesn't work that way. You change your environment first, and then growth begins. A plant only grows when placed in fertile soil. A mind only expands when placed in fertile surroundings. You cannot grow your confidence in a room full of doubters. You cannot grow your ambition in a room full of small thinkers. You cannot grow your courage in a room full of fearful people. You cannot grow your income in a room where everyone is comfortable being broke. If you want to transform your life, you must transform your environment. This is not selfish, it is necessary. Some people are afraid to distance themselves because they think it means cutting people off with anger. It doesn't. You don't need to fight with anyone. You don't need to announce your growth. You don't need to explain your decisions. You simply shift your energy. You invest your time differently. You spend more hours around people who speak possibility. You absorb content that feeds your vision. You place yourself in rooms where success is normal. Gradually, your environment begins to shape a new version of you. One that is capable of handling more money, more responsibility, more opportunity, and more growth. When you upgrade your environment, you upgrade your mindset. When you upgrade your mindset, you upgrade your decisions. When you upgrade your decisions, you upgrade your income. This is why people who join the right communities, attend the right seminars, or connect with the right mentors experience rapid financial growth. Their environment shifts their identity shifts their habits. Their habits shift their results, and those results attract money because money always seeks those who are growing, learning, expanding, and stepping into higher versions of themselves. Environment is not just who you're around, it's also what you consume. The books you read, the videos you watch, the voices you allow into your mind. Every piece of information plants a seed. If you water negativity, negativity grows. If you water courage, courage grows. If you water hope, hope grows. If you water discipline, discipline grows. And if you water financial knowledge, financial confidence grows. Most people stay broke not because they lack potential, but because they stay planted in soil that cannot nourish their dreams. When you finally decide to uproot yourself from environments that shrink you and replant yourself in environments that expand you, everything begins to shift. Money begins to move toward you because you begin to move toward your highest self. Another reason most people stay broke is because they are afraid to reinvent themselves. They cling tightly to the version of who they used to be, even when that version is no longer capable of reaching the life they want. Reinvention requires letting go of old habits, old identities, old excuses, old fears, and sometimes even old dreams. But the truth is that every new level of life demands a new version of you. Most people stay stuck not because the opportunity isn't there, but because they refuse to evolve into the person who can handle that opportunity. Reinvention is uncomfortable, and discomfort feels like danger to the mind. But staying the same is far more dangerous to your future. People often say, "This is just who I am." They use this phrase as a shield to protect themselves from change. But what they don't realize is that identity is not fixed. It is a collection of stories you repeat to yourself about what you can and cannot do. These stories become self-imposed limits. When someone says, "I'm not good with money," they're not describing reality, they're describing a story they've accepted. When they say, "I've never been confident," they're not stating fact, they're stating identity, and identity can be rewritten. Identity can be rebuilt, identity can be upgraded. The tragedy is that most people never give themselves the permission to become someone new. Reinvention feels scary because it threatens the comfort zone. The comfort zone is familiar, predictable, and emotionally safe, even if it is financially suffocating. To reinvent yourself, you must disrupt your routines, your beliefs, your behaviors. You must confront parts of yourself you've been avoiding. And you must be willing to be a beginner again, awkward, uncertain, imperfect. Most people avoid this discomfort by choosing familiarity over transformation. They say they want a better life, but they cling to the habits that keep their life exactly the same. They dream of wealth, but hold on to the identity of someone who fears risk, avoids learning, or hesitates to take action. You cannot build a new life with the same identity that built your old one. Money finds the brave because reinvention requires bravery. It takes courage to admit that the old version of you is not enough for the future you desire. It takes courage to break patterns. It takes courage to build new habits. It takes courage to unlearn what no longer serves you. It takes courage to walk away from an identity that has defined you for years and step into a new one, even when no one else understands it yet. Reinvention is not just a change in behavior, it's a rebirth. And most people are afraid of the internal death that must happen before a new version of themselves can be born. There are people who stay trapped in cycles of financial struggle, not because they lack opportunity, but because they keep making decisions from their old identity. A person who believes they're unlucky will reject chances that could change their life. A person who believes they're unqualified will hesitate before applying for roles that could elevate them. A person who believes they're unworthy of wealth will subconsciously sabotage financial opportunities. Reinvention requires challenging those beliefs at the root. It requires telling yourself a new story, one that empowers instead of restricts, one that expands instead of diminishes. Think about the individuals who transformed their lives dramatically. They had one thing in common: they reinvented themselves intentionally. They upgraded their mindset, redefined their standards, and restructured their habits. They became bolder. They became more disciplined. They became more curious. They leaned into growth even when it terrified them. They didn't wait for permission. They didn't wait for perfect circumstances. They decided who they needed to become and then grew into that version day by day, choice by choice, habit by habit. Their reinvention created the life that people now admire. This is the part most people don't understand. Your future cannot begin until your old self ends. You cannot keep the attitude of someone who avoids responsibility and expect to become someone wealthy. You cannot keep the mindset of someone who fears failure and expect to step into opportunity. You cannot keep the discipline of someone inconsistent and expect extraordinary results. A new life demands a new level of you. And a new level of you demands that you shed the layers that no longer belong. Reinvention often requires walking alone for a season. Many people avoid growth because they fear losing relationships, approval, or acceptance. They fear people saying, "You've changed," but changing is the point. Remaining who you are to keep others comfortable is the fastest way to sabotage your destiny. Growth requires solitude. Reinvention requires distance. Not forever, but long enough to rebuild yourself without being pulled back into the old patterns that shaped your past. The world may